Okay, in this module we're going to discuss some basic principles and teachings of Taoism and say a little bit about the scriptures of Taoism as well. First, Taoism really is an ancient religion. It's really hard to trace its beginnings, but it finally began to come together with the publication of the Tao Te Ching, the Tao Te Ching, supposedly written by Lao Tzu. And the story is that Lao Tzu, who lived supposedly in the 6th century BCE, became disenchanted and annoyed and frustrated trying to perpetuate his teachings and get people to take his advice about good living and so forth. And so he decided just to head for the hills, so to speak. And the story goes that on his way out of the kingdom, someone stopped him and convinced him to write down his wisdom before he left. He was recognized as a very wise person. And so the story goes, he sat down and penned the Tao Te Ching, which is 5,000 Chinese characters. And it's a small book that consists of 81 chapters, written sort of like poems. And so a lot of the basic ideas of Taoism actually came from the Tao Te Ching. And secondarily, there's also another work of scriptures, the Chuang Tzu, written by a person called Chuang Tzu. In both cases, however, it's thought that these were not real historical individuals. Like Lao Tzu, for example, when you translate it, it means something like old boy. So it's thought that really these two collections of writings were just sort of cobbled together from the writings of a number of different people. Anyway, so Taoism begins to really take shape when the Tao Te Ching is finally compiled and published, and that's the 3rd century BCE. Some important principles. We can start with, I guess, just a general description of Taoism. Taoism encourages individuals to live simply, live with humility, compassion, patience, not to be overly disruptive, try to control your ego, control your wants and desires. The world was here long before you got here. It will be here after you're gone. And the basic idea is to strive for simplicity. Don't live an overly complicated life. And those basic principles come out in some of the important terms. So let's look at them. First, there's Wu Wei. It essentially means something like non-action, but really some people like to state it as Wei, Wu Wei, which means action without action. And let's talk about that for a bit. It doesn't mean, the concept of Wu Wei doesn't mean that we should not do anything, because clearly a person has to raise their family and make a living and so forth. But it does mean to act in such a way that you're not overly disruptive. If there's a simple, functional way to do something, then that's the way we should proceed. There's a teaching story often used in Taoism about a butcher who explains he's apparently teaching some young people about his craft, and he holds up a knife and says, "I haven't sharpened this knife in 20 years. And that's because I just find the empty space between the bones, and the knife just naturally slides through the bones in this empty space." So in other words, the point being, he doesn't force anything. If it's a square peg, find the square hole. If it's a round peg, find the round hole. Stop trying to pound a square peg into a round hole, for example. I often use that analogy in my anthropology classes in regard to culture and our cultural ideologies, and the way that culture and our cultural ideologies often make a mess of nature. Nature is so simple and so evident, but for whatever reason we fail to embrace nature in all of its quote-unquote natural glory. We insist on nature being the way we want it to be. But Taoism says no, that's a futile endeavor that can only lead to unhappiness. So Wu Wei, action, but without being overly disruptive. And then we have the concept of Qi, also sometimes pronounced, also written Qi, so C-H-I or Qi. And Qi refers to the sort of essence of life. Many cultures have a similar term. So for example, in Haiti, they have the concept of the grosse bon âge. And in French Creole, it just means big, good spirit. And it's what actually animates the body. It's what's behind circulation and respiration and so forth. In Africa, they have Ashe, in sub-Saharan West Africa. So Qi is just simply sort of like the life force that animates everything. And it does have a natural flow to it, because of course it's not static, it does flow. And the idea is not to disrupt the natural flow of Qi and the natural rhythms of Qi. And that would bring us to Feng Shui, for example, which is the idea that there's a certain way we can arrange our natural environment around us so as not to disrupt the flow of Qi, this flow of natural energy around us. Again, get the basic concept here. Nature is good. Natural simplicity is best. Leave it be. Try to adapt to it. And continue with this theme, we have Pu, P'-U. It translates as something like uncarved block, which again says that simplicity is always best. Another way to look at it is like this. Taoists encourage us to experience things without running them through a filter, like rose-colored glasses, or applying our political biases to whatever. Try to go back to that time when our mind was empty and we could just perceive things in their natural state. So there's beauty in simplicity. There's beauty in the uncarved block. And once again, I think you see the general gist of what's being said here. Simplicity is good. Things in their natural state are good. And we have, of course, the Tao. And it's really hard to say exactly what it is. In fact, Taoists claim that you cannot put it in words. It's literally ineffable. We can't communicate the idea. But it means something like the way, or the path, or the foundation of all things. It does not, however, mean God, although all things are said to have come from the Tao. First there was the Tao, and then there was everything else. So it's kind of like the way things are. And I know I'm being a bit cryptic here, but it is very difficult to explain and describe. And I will read a few passages regarding the Tao when we talk about the scriptures in just a minute that might help us out a little bit. And then finally we have the yin and yang. This represents not good and bad or good and evil, but complementary forces, with the yang representing aggressive, bright, positive, male sorts of things, and yin representing the patient, soft, pliable, shady, feminine side of things. But the point being that it's all good. It's all good. If you look at the yin-yang symbol, you will see that the way it's drawn shows you that these two principles are complementary to one another. So it's not like one is desirable and one is not so desirable. They're both desirable. And the object is to attain some sort of balance in things, in the yin and the yang. So hence the symbol. If you look at it closely, the area covered by black is roughly equivalent to the area covered by white. Also, too, there's a curvilinear separation between the two, not a straight line, that shows you that they're complementary and they work together. And then finally, the scriptures. I've said something about the scriptures thus far. There are actually 1,120 different volumes. It's an immense literature. However, many recognize the Tao Te Ching to be the primary scripture and the Chuang Tzu to be the second most important scripture in Taoism. And I thought at this point we would take just a second and look at a few of the chapters in the Tao Te Ching and how they sort of relate to some of the comments I've made. Here's chapter 1 of the Tao Te Ching, describing the Tao. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the origin of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of myriad things. Thus, constantly without desire, one observes its essence. Constantly with desire, one observes its manifestations. These two emerge together but differ in name. This unity is said to be the mystery of mysteries, the door to all wonders. Also, chapter 25 describes the Tao, and here's what it says. There is something formlessly created before heaven and earth, so silent, so ethereal, independent and changeless, circulating and ceaseless, it can be regarded as the mother of the world. I do not know its name. Identifying it, I call it Tao. Forced to describe it, I call it great. Great means passing. Passing means receding. Receding means returning. Therefore, the Tao is great. Heaven is great. Earth is great. The sovereign is also great. There are 4 greats in the universe, and the sovereign occupies one of them. Humans follow the laws of earth. Earth follows the laws of heaven. And heaven follows the laws of Tao. Tao follows the laws of nature. In regard to emptiness and nothingness, and how in Taoism these things represent beauty, here's chapter 11. 30 spokes join in one hub. In its emptiness there is a function of a vehicle. Mix clay to create a container. In its emptiness there is the function of a container. Cut open doors and windows to create a room. In its emptiness there is the function of a room. Therefore, that which exists is used to create benefit. That which is empty is used to create functionality. So, actually, nothingness is something, and it is something that is good. Chapter 29 addresses the concept of Wu Wei. Those who wish to take the world and control it, I see that they cannot succeed. The world is a sacred instrument. One cannot control it. The one who controls it will fail. The one who grasps it will lose. Right? So the idea that don't force things. Because all things, and there's a colon there, either lead or follow, either blow hot or cold, either have strength or weakness, either have ownership or take by force. Therefore the sage does the following: eliminates extremes, eliminates excess, and eliminates arrogance. And then there is beauty and simplicity. This is chapter 47. Without going out the door, know the world. Without peering out the window, see the heavenly Tao. The further one goes, the less one knows. Therefore the sage knows without going, names without seeing, achieves without striving. And then finally, in humility, there is wisdom. Chapter 71. To know that you do not know is highest. To not know but think you know is flawed. Only when one recognizes the fault as a fault can one be without fault. The sages are without fault because they recognize the fault as a fault. That is why they are without fault. In other words, if you're reflexive enough, you can. In other words, what I'm saying is that if you can think back on yourself and see where you have done wrong or where you are going wrong with your thinking or whatever, then you too will be without fault. So to know that you do not know is highest. To not know but think you know is flawed. Humility leads to wisdom.